Isabel stood in the kitchen, her hands still dusted with flour, as she prepared dinner for her children. The table was set, and the warm, comforting aroma of homemade food filled the room. But something was off. The unease had crept in slowly over the evening, and now, as the sun began to set, it weighed on her like a dark cloud. Pablo hadn't come home yet, and though she tried to push the worry aside, deep down, she already knew. A mother's intuition is never wrong. She could feel the storm brewing. Sighing, Isabel glanced at the clock for what seemed like the 100th time. Suddenly, the phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It wasn't a message from Pablo. It was a picture. Her heart stopped. There he was, wrapped in the arms of Teresa, laughing as if he had no care in the world, as if the life they had built together meant nothing to him. Her pulse quickened, fingers trembling as she opened the next message. "Don't come looking for me. I only took what's mine. Goodbye." The floor felt like it was falling away beneath her. Gripping the nearest chair to steady herself, Isabel whispered in disbelief, "He's gone. He really left." The words barely escaped her lips before a surge of anger rose within her. But she swallowed it down. There was no time for tears, not now. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Mariana, her childhood friend, stood there, alarmed by Isabel's pale face and trembling hands. "Isa, what's wrong? You're shaking." "He's gone, Mari," Isabel choked out, her voice breaking. "He took everything, the money, the savings, everything. He left me with the kids and ran off with her. With Teresa." Each word felt like a dagger, cutting deeper into the raw wound. Isabel sank into the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling, as if searching for answers in the cracks that time had left behind. Mariana knelt beside her, gripping her hands firmly. "He's a coward, Isabel. A weak man. But you are strong, stronger than you even realize." Isabel shook her head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. A bitter mix of rage and helplessness. "How am I supposed to do this alone, Mari? How am I going to take care of my kids? I have nothing left." As Mariana tried to comfort her, the sound of little footsteps echoed in the hallway. Miguel and Sofia appeared in the doorway, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. "Mommy, we're hungry," Miguel said innocently, not understanding the weight of the situation. Isabel quickly wiped her tears with the sleeve of her blouse and took a deep breath. She knelt down to their level, her voice calm despite the chaos inside her. "It's okay, my loves. Dinner will be ready soon. You don't need to worry about anything, all right?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt, but she knew she had to stay strong for them. Mariana watched her friend in quiet admiration, sensing the strength that Isabel was beginning to summon, even in the midst of her heartbreak. There, in the depths of her despair, a flicker of resilience began to grow. The weight of Pablo's betrayal, the emptiness he left behind, none of it would be enough to break her. Not yet. The next day, the phone rang again, but this time it was from the bank. The voice on the other end was cold, professional. "Mrs. Isabel, your account has been emptied. There was a large transfer made yesterday. We need you to come in so we can verify the details. If the transaction wasn't authorized by you, we may need to involve the authorities." Isabel's face paled as the reality of the situation sank in even further. Pablo hadn't just left her emotionally shattered. He had taken everything. The savings she had been carefully building for years were gone. Her world was crumbling, but she knew she couldn't afford to fall apart. Not with her children depending on her. Without hesitation, Isabel went to the bank. She was greeted by the manager, who looked at her with suspicion, sensing that something wasn't right. "Mrs. Isabel, we have documents here signed in your handwriting, giving Pablo full control over your account. Could you please confirm this for us?" the manager asked, sliding the papers toward her. Isabel stared at the documents, disbelief washing over her. She hadn't signed anything, and yet, there it was, her husband's betrayal in ink, as clear as day. After watching the security footage, she was hit with another devastating blow. There was Pablo, with Teresa by his side, as they shamelessly stole everything. That night, Isabel lay awake, listening to the soft laughter of her children from their room. For a brief moment, everything felt normal, But then the crushing reality came rushing back. She was alone, Pablo was gone, and all their money had disappeared like sand slipping through her fingers. The weight on her chest grew heavier, but as she watched Miguel and Sofia playing innocently, a fire ignited within her. This wasn't the end. Pablo may have left her with nothing, but she still had her children, and for them, she would fight. No matter how difficult things became, Isabel knew she had to keep going. As she stared out the window into the night, she made a silent vow. Life may have torn everything apart, but I will rebuild it piece by piece. Pablo may have taken everything, but he would not take her strength. Isabel stood firm, her heart pounding in her chest, but there was no room for weakness. Her children depended on her, and the weight of that responsibility gave her strength she didn't know she had. The pain wasn't drowning her, it was shaping her. Taking a deep breath, she made a decision. Waiting wasn't an option anymore. She picked up the phone and called Mariana. Minutes later, Mariana was at the door, concern etched across her face. "Mari, I need your help. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I can't and I won't let my children suffer for Pablo's mistakes." Isabel's voice, though tired, carried a new determination. Her eyes, red from sleepless nights, now gleamed with a resolve that Mariana hadn't seen before. Mariana smiled, placing a reassuring hand on Isabel's shoulder. "You've already started, ISA. Look at yourself. You're still standing, still fighting. It's not easy, but you're going to make it. And I'll be here, by your side." Their conversation was interrupted by the soft sound of Sofia's footsteps as she ran toward her mother, clutching a crayon drawing. "Look, Mommy, I made this for you." It was a colorful scribble depicting Isabel wearing a superhero cape. Isabel swallowed her emotion, holding the paper like it was the most precious gift in the world. "Thank you, my love. This is exactly what I needed." Later that day, Isabel made her way to the neighborhood market. Jose, the owner and a longtime neighbor, greeted her with a knowing look. "Isabel, I heard what happened. If you need anything at all, the tab's open for you." For a moment, Isabel hesitated, her pride weighing heavily on her. But then, she offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Jose. I'll pay, but I just need some time." Jose nodded. "You've always been an honest woman. I know you'll pull through this." And so, little by little, the small victories began to pile up. Each day, Isabel held on to a strength she never knew she possessed. She found a temporary job as a seamstress, working late into the night after her children had fallen asleep. The exhaustion was relentless, but so was she. One evening, as Miguel watched her work, he asked, "Mommy, why are you always so tired?" Isabel sat beside him, gently stroking his hair. "Because I'm building something, my son. I'm taking care of you and Sofia. Everything I'm doing now is for you too." She paused, searching for the right words. Sometimes life gives us challenges that feel too big. But you know what we do with those, right? Miguel looked at her, curious. "What do we do, Mommy?" "We take every piece of difficulty and we turn it into something good, something strong." The days turned into weeks, and the Isabel that many thought was broken revealed a quiet resilience. It wasn't easy. There were nights when she cried softly after the children had gone to bed, the weight of fear and exhaustion finally finding a crack in her armor. But every morning, she rose, wiped her face, and started again. One evening, Mariana arrived with surprising news. "I heard Pablo's in trouble. It seems things aren't going as well as he thought." Isabel paused, her brows furrowing. "Trouble? What do you mean?" "Teresa left him without a cent. And now, he's on the verge of being arrested." Isabel stood in silence for a moment, processing the irony of it all. Part of her wanted to laugh at the cruel twist of fate, but another part felt something deeper, an ancient pain mixed with a cautious relief. "He made his choice, Mari. Now I have to keep making mine." She knew that while Pablo's world was falling apart, hers was just beginning to rebuild. Not out of vengeance, but out of love. The unwavering love for her children that guided her through even the darkest moments. Meanwhile, Pablo sat alone on a worn-out leather couch in an apartment far less luxurious than the one he and Teresa had dreamed of. The silence was suffocating. Teresa had been gone for 2 days, with no word of where she was. His phone buzzed with messages from the bank, but he ignored them. The emptiness around him grew louder with every passing minute. In a fit of frustration, Pablo jumped up, hurling an empty glass against the wall. "Teresa!" he shouted, but only the echo of his voice responded. The woman for whom he had risked everything, betrayed his family, abandoned his children, had simply vanished. A heavy weight settled in his chest, and for the first time, regret began to creep into his mind. "You were no better than Isabel, were you?" he muttered to himself, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Memories of his ex-wife flooded his mind. Her simplicity, her patience, the deep love she had for their children. Everything he had traded for a fleeting dream now seemed like a cruel joke. Slumping back onto the couch, his eyes stared blankly at the ceiling. "What have I done?" he whispered, his voice weaker this time, almost as if confessing to himself. Suddenly, the door flew open, and Teresa walked in, dragging a suitcase behind her. Without even looking at him, she headed straight for the bedroom. "Teresa, where have you been?" Pablo's voice was a mix of fear and frustration as he stood, but she didn't stop. Finally, she paused, her hand still on the suitcase handle, and turned to face him, her expression cold and distant. "I'm leaving, Pablo. It's over." Her voice was like ice. Pablo stared at her, confused. "Over? What do you mean, over? We built all of this together." He stepped toward her, reaching out, but she recoiled, her body flinching at his touch, as if repelled by it. "Together?" Teresa let out a harsh, mocking laugh. "You built a prison for yourself, Pablo. I only did what was convenient for me. Did you really think I'd stay here and watch everything fall apart? The money's gone, and you, well, you're just another ruined man. In every sense of the word." Her words hit him like a punch in the gut. "So, it was all about the money, wasn't it?" Teresa stared at him without blinking. "Yes, it always was. And now, there's nothing left for me here." With that, she grabbed her suitcase and walked out, not bothering to look back. Pablo stood frozen in the middle of the empty living room, the silence closing in once more. After she was gone, the quiet felt heavier than ever. Pablo sank to the floor, his head in his hands, realizing, too late, the full weight of his mistakes. For the first time, Pablo felt the true weight of the decisions he had made. Regret hit him like a crushing wave, overwhelming every part of his being. "What have I done? What have I done, my God?" he whispered under his breath, his voice trembling as memories of Isabel and their children flooded his mind. He tried to push them away, but it was useless. What he had thrown away was exactly what he now longed for the most. Days later, reality turned even crueler. He sat in his apartment, papers scattered across the table as he tried to organize his finances, when there was a knock on the door. 2 men in suits stood before him. Mr. Pablo Rivera, one of them asked, while the other watched him closely. Pablo swallowed hard, sensing that something was terribly wrong. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" he responded, though his voice betrayed his rising anxiety. The man pulled out a badge, identifying them as police officers. "We're here to discuss the bank fraud and document forgery under your name. We need you to come with us to clear up a few things." At that moment, Pablo's heart began to race. "This is a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong," he stammered, but the unwavering look in the officer's eyes told him there was no way out. The evidence was there, and he knew it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. "Please place your hands behind your back. You're under arrest." The sensation of the cold handcuffs around his wrists was surreal. How had it come to this? As he was led away, Pablo glanced around, realizing that the life he had built, the one he had traded everything for, was crumbling before his eyes. The grand future he had envisioned with Teresa had turned to dust. As the police car drove off, Pablo allowed himself one final thought. "Isabel, what did I do to you?" Years later, Isabel stood at the window of her office, high in a building she never imagined she'd step foot in. The morning sun bathed the city skyline in golden light, and she marveled at how far she had come. The woman who now gazed out over the city was a far cry from the one who had crumpled on her kitchen floor years before, abandoned and lost, unsure of what the future held. Now, that future was bright, and it was all because of her quiet strength. She didn't allow herself to dwell on what could have been, only on what still could be built. The phone rang, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Mariana. "ISA, you won't believe it. I just saw the final sales report. We're about to close the best quarter in the company's history." Isabel smiled, that reserved, knowing smile she had perfected over the years. "Really? Well, I guess all the hard work paid off, didn't it?" "Are you kidding? ISA, you built this from the ground up. You did what no one thought was possible," Mariana insisted, her voice full of excitement. "You're an inspiration to all of us." "I just did what had to be done, Mari. There was no other choice," Isabel replied, but deep inside, she knew the weight of her friend's words. She had fought hard, sacrificed much, but it was never just for herself. It had always been for her children, for Sofia and Miguel, who were now growing up in an environment filled with love, security, and strength. They were her reason for everything. Later, Isabel made her way downstairs for a meeting with her team. As she walked through the office, employees greeted her with respect and admiration. She had become a leader, firm but fair, earning the loyalty of everyone around her. As she passed the reception desk, a newly hired employee looked at her with bright eyes. "Mrs. Isabel, I just wanted to say that it's an honor to work here. You're such an inspiration to me." Isabel paused, smiling warmly at the young woman. "Thank you. But remember, no one gets anywhere alone. Everything here was built through collective effort. I'm just one piece of the puzzle." The meeting was a success. Like so many others, Isabel now led with unshakable confidence. But the highlight of her day came in the afternoon when she was invited to speak at a local school. The principal, knowing her story, had called her an example of resilience and triumph. "Isabel, many of the mothers in our community look up to you. You faced the impossible and won," the principal said. That evening, in front of dozens of mothers and young women, Isabel shared her story, not with bitterness, but with pride. "When I was left with nothing, the only thing I had left was hope. And that was enough. Every day was a battle, and I wondered if I could even get out of bed the next morning. But every time I looked at my children, I knew I had to keep going. That's what brought me here." One of the mothers in the audience, moved to tears, raised her hand. "But how did you do it, Isabel? How did you overcome so much pain and still become the strong woman we see today?" Isabel paused, reflecting. "Pain, no matter how overwhelming, can be transformed. I didn't want my children to see their mother defeated. And over time, I realized I was stronger than I had ever imagined. I had the support of friends, of people who believed in me. And I believed in myself, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. That was the key." After the talk, Mariana found her in the hallway, her eyes shining with emotion. "ISA, do you realize the impact you had today? I saw it in their eyes. You gave them hope." Isabel shook her head modestly. "I just wanted them to know it's possible, no matter how much the world seems to be against you." That night, at home, as she read to Sofia and Miguel before bed, Isabel felt a deep peace. It wasn't about the financial success or the praise she had received. It was something far more profound. The certainty that she had done the right thing, that despite everything, she had built a new world for herself and her children. Not an empire of bricks and mortar, but one of love, strength, and resilience. While Isabel lived the best moments of her life, Pablo sat in his prison cell, hands trembling as he stared at the cold floor. The silence of the jail was broken only by the distant sound of footsteps echoing down the hallways. Time had become a foreign concept, days, months, years all blurred together. He no longer knew how long he had been there. All he knew was that regret consumed him a little more each day. Every second that passed, the echo of Pablo's poor decisions materialized in the suffocating solitude that now surrounded him. He sat there, feeling the weight of it all, murmuring to himself in a low, broken whisper, I just wanted a better life." But no one was there to hear him. The cell was as empty as the life he had built. Teresa was gone, just like the money, the false dreams, and the promise of a luxurious life. All that remained was him, paying the steep price for his choices. The metallic sound of the iron door opening startled him, pulling him from his thoughts. A guard stood at the entrance of his cell, his expression serious. "You have a visitor, Pablo?" Pablo rose slowly, a knot forming in his throat. A visitor? He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not Isabel. The last time he saw her, she had barely looked him in the eye. There had been something in that silent goodbye that shattered his heart. As he was escorted to the visitation room, his mind raced. When he finally saw the figure of a woman waiting on the other side of the glass, his heart skipped a beat. It was Isabel. Her hair was neatly tied back, and she wore elegant clothes, looking nothing like the broken woman he had left years ago. She was a different person now, strong, confident, someone who had overcome everything he had put her through. Pablo sat down, his eyes locking with hers. The silence between them stretched, seconds feeling like hours. Finally, with trembling hands, he picked up the phone to speak to her. "Isabel," he began, his voice faltering. "I don't know where to start." Isabel gazed at him, her eyes steady but not cruel. "You don't need to start, Pablo. I already know what you're going to say. I ruined everything with you, with our kids. I was a fool. Nothing I did can be undone." He sighed deeply, the pain and guilt etched into every line of his face. "If I could go back, I swear I'd do everything differently." Isabel leaned closer to the glass, her expression still calm, yet firm. "What you did, Pablo, wasn't just to me. It was to our children. You abandoned them. You destroyed the family we built together." She paused, taking a deep breath. "But what hurts the most is realizing I spent years loving someone who never truly cared about us." Pablo closed his eyes as hot tears began to form. "I cared. I still care. But I was blind. I was chasing a life I thought I deserved." "You had everything, Pablo," Isabel interrupted, her voice firm but without resentment. "You had a wife who loved you, children who adored you. We didn't need anything else. What you were searching for outside our home was already there." He had no response. The truth of her words crushed him, making it harder to breathe. Finally, he whispered, "And now, what do you want from me?" Isabel remained silent for a moment before speaking again. "I don't want anything from you, Pablo. I came here to say one thing." She paused, meeting his eyes one last time. "I forgive you." The words hit him like a blow he didn't expect. Pablo opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her forgiveness was the last thing he expected. He didn't deserve it. You forgive me?" "Yes, Pablo," she replied calmly. "But not for you. For me, and for our children. I need to leave the past behind, and they need peace." Pablo shook his head, disbelief flooding his face. "Isabel, you're stronger than I ever was. I don't know how you did it." She smiled sadly, her eyes softening. "Pain teaches us, Pablo. It taught me to be stronger than I ever imagined. Now I need to continue with my life. And you need to face the consequences of your choices." Before he could say another word, Isabel hung up the phone and stood up, walking toward the exit without looking back. Pablo watched her leave, feeling the last shred of hope slip away. The image of her, head held high, walking out of the prison was the final glimmer of light he would see. In the silence of the visitation room, Pablo realized his fate was sealed. He would remain there, trapped by the invisible chains of his decisions, while Isabel was finally free from the pain he had caused her. Outside the prison, a soft breeze brushed Isabel's face as she walked toward her children, who were waiting for her anxiously. Sophia ran toward her with open arms. "Mommy," she cried. Isabel knelt down, wrapping them both in a tight embrace. "It's all okay now," she said, smiling. "Everything is going to be okay." Isabel had chosen the hardest path, the path of forgiveness. And in doing so, she had found her peace. For many, forgiveness might seem like weakness, but in truth, forgiveness is never a sign of frailty. It is an act of liberation, a power that frees us from a life filled with bitterness and resentment. In the end, It is resilience that allows us to move forward stronger and wiser. If this story touched your heart, don't hesitate to give it a like and share it with those who need to hear this message of perseverance and triumph. Subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories of courage and transformation. Until the next video.